YouTube, what's going on, man? It's Father Dark, and today we're going to be talking about some of the reasons why we think Blade didn't come, or if he is coming, etc. We're just going to be talking about Blade in general and what's going on with that, and some of the reasons that I'm going to give, or they're things that reasons why I think he's not coming based off of different comments and things I've thought myself, different stuff like that. But I'm going to start out with the ones that I think are the least realistic as to why he didn't come. And we're going to kind of talk about what's been going on with the Blade, etc. Only because people seem to be really interested in him, and we're going to get into why I think that is and stuff. But before I even get into all of that, I want to say too, let me know in the comments how you guys have been feeling about season 2. I only got to play yesterday. Yesterday I played the Krakoa 24/7 map, and I'm really close to getting Spider-Man Lord, so I've pretty much just been grinding that out. And then I played a little bit of rank. I had fun with that, but I only got to play a handful of matches before I had to do dad stuff. And today I've jumped on, but at this point I've only played a couple of games, which will be the games that I'll put in the background as the the visual aesthetic for you guys while I'm talking. But I am curious to know what you guys have been thinking, because any of the comments that I've gotten so far from people that I can tell have obviously been after the season 2 start. It's kind of been a mixed review. Some people are saying that matchmaking is worse and that, ranked is worse and stuff like that. Some people have been really enjoying it and everything in between. So I am curious, as feedback, what you guys are concerned about and what your thoughts and opinions are and stuff like that. Let me know in the comments. I try to respond to everybody. But let's go ahead and get into the Blade situation. So first, I just want to preface and say that Blade, if you really think about it, there's plenty, of course, before Blade, there were plenty of TV shows, Marvel movies and stuff like that here and there and stuff. But Blade was really like the first super successful, I'm talking about like big budget movie theater type deal in regards to Marvel movies. I can't remember where I read it. This was a very long time ago, years and years ago. But I had read somewhere where they were saying back like when we first started getting like the MCU, that Blade was actually the reason that Marvel decided, or Marvel Studios at the time, this is before I believe Disney bought them out. I can't remember exactly when Disney bought them out. You guys can also let me know in the comments about that as well. But nonetheless, though, basically they were saying that a lot of people thought that Iron Man was the reason why we got the MCU, in regards to like why the company felt like it was something that they should actually go for, because that had never been done before. Prior to that, I'm as old as dirt, so I went to school with dinosaurs. That's how old I am. So it's like I remember a period of time when we had every superhero movie was just a singular superhero movie, right? It was like we were watching Batman, it was just Batman. There were no Batman and Supermans. There was no DCU, MCU, any of that. And I feel like studios were very scared to kind of branch out and do like bigger universes and stuff like that. I feel like that was something they weren't even thinking about, right? It was like, we're gonna do one superhero movie and maybe we're gonna kind of put someone else in there and reference that as like an Easter egg, but you're not actually gonna like see them in their costumes and stuff. And even giving them their costumes was kind of like this far-fetched thing. I mean, you think back to the X-Men, and I remember them saying like, oh, things from the comic books don't always translate very well onto the screen. That's why we gave them all black outfits, But I'm kind of rambling in regards to that. I just thought that really should preface that Blade has been a very important part of Marvel, and it really popularizing the characters and stuff outside of the comic books, because even myself, as much as of a comic book fan I am, and how much I feel like I'm a nerd when it comes to stuff like this, and have always been since I was a little kid, there's not been one time that I've ever bought a Blade comic book. And I'm just being honest with you. If Blade ever appeared in a comic book, it was because he had an appearance in someone else's comic that I was reading. I've always been more of like a, household name kind of guy, like the X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman, anything like DC related. I've always loved DC comics, a lot more and stuff, just personally. And it's really just because of Batman. Everything else was just kind of, icing on the cake. But, nonetheless, though, there's a lot of people that feel very passionately about Blade, and I think that, that's kind of like, I've said it before, but I think that's kind of the issue with this game, is that you do have a lot of people that have grown up with a lot of characters and different characters and stuff, and they feel very passionately about them. So like when these leaks and stuff come out, me personally, I take everything with a grain of salt, right? Yeah, I get excited if they say, oh, Daredevil's coming. I'm like, oh, I love Daredevil. I'd love to be able to play Daredevil, thinking he might have like echolocation and stuff like that and all types of stuff, and all the different possibilities. I love being able to play Spider-Man and swing around as Spider-Man and just any of the different characters in the game and stuff. But like I said, whenever I hear that there's leaks for different characters, at this point we've had like 14 or 15 different characters be leaked. And, if I find out that character's not coming in the next season or whatever the next update is or whatever the case is, I don't really take it personal. I don't, but I know there's a lot of people that do. There's a lot of people that they want Jean Grey, they want Cyclops, they want, Blade, they want all these different people. When people, had found out about Ultron way before, like this was back in December, like early December, when Ultron, his full kit, everything was leaked. People were, oh man, they're really, really excited for him. And, when they found out the Fantastic Four was coming out instead of Ultron, people were just like, well, I don't understand. It was leaked. And, like I said, with me personally, leaks, I'm used to it. I've been covering leaks for years and years now in regards to like different games and stuff. Primarily before Marvel Rivals came out, it was Call of Duty. And, I will say that Call of Duty was a little bit more like reliable with their leaks, only because I can't say it's like they were reliable. It's just that once they put stuff in the game files, it was definitely coming out. And I don't think that Marvel Rivals is doing it on purpose to like troll people. I mean, they've already said that that's not their goal. I think a lot of times the files have to get put into the game because they have to kind of test them, see how they're going to work, and sometimes stuff gets left behind, or, sometimes they just don't think about it, or whatever the case is, right? And then we see it and we go, oh, well, this must be what's happening. And, the thing that's different too is I feel like with games like Call of Duty and a lot of other games, they kind of like plan their stuff out like a year in advance. Whereas I think with Marvel Rivals, they're kind of playing it by ear and seeing, what's gonna benefit the most, and what people want the most, And I think that's probably a big reason why, we got a tank, or why we're getting got a tank and we're getting a healer, within this season, is because they're starting to see that there's a big balance or imbalance between the amount of DPS we have, which makes up like a ridiculous amount of the characters versus the tanks and the healers. And, that kind of leads me into, the first thing that I was going to say. So, the main reason why I think, or not the main, but the first thing that I would say, that I've seen a lot of people say in regards to why Blade isn't coming, is that the devs are trolling, right? And like I just said, the devs have already stated numerous different times, like they're not in this to troll. That's not even like what they have going on. They're too busy trying to work on the game and make it successful. And if this was other games that I've played in the past, I would be like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, that I don't believe anything you say because of like their track history and stuff, or the track record. But with these devs, I feel like they actually do care and they do listen. Like of course they have bosses, they have CEOs and investors and stuff like that they have to kind of listen to. But when you've come from a game like Call of Duty, and the way that they go out of their way to not listen to their community and to kind of do the opposite of whatever they say, almost like they don't want people to play their game a lot of times, you would look at a game like this and you go, oh man, thank you. You know what I'm saying? They do stuff a lot of times that I don't even think of. And, especially with like free to play games nowadays, I'm usually on the side of the business simply because, I feel like, why wouldn't you be, right? I don't expect to come into anyone's job and, if you're working at McDonald's, I don't expect to go in there and go, hey, just give me free food and you get fired later, or get money taken out of your check or whatever, because I just don't feel like paying for fries today. No, I'd walk into your job, I'd pay for fries. And I wouldn't say, oh, the fries are, $3 for a large or something. Give it to me for $1 because I feel like you should, because they're just French fries, and French fries are just potatoes, right? Like I'm not going to rationalize it that way. If I don't feel like paying $3 for fries, I'm just not going to eat there, right? But at the end of the day, though, to me, it just makes sense when you have microtransactions in a free-to-play game. Now, when you charge money for a game, that's different. I feel like that's a whole different topic and subject. But, if the game is free-to-play and you charge money for cosmetics, that makes sense to me. How else are you supposed to make money from the game and profit? And who does work and doesn't expect to be paid? If there's one person that has a job and expects to go into that job every day and not get paid, please let me know who you are so I can go to your job and get a bunch of free stuff, and you can just work for free, and I can just kind of study you and see why exactly you would ever do something like that. As much as I enjoy making content, the goal ultimately was to get monetized, and now that I'm monetized, like that's what it is, right? Like I said, I enjoy doing this, but I also enjoy getting paid and being able to buy my kids, video games and food and pay my mortgage and stuff, right? Stuff like that. So it just makes sense to me. And the devs trolling, that doesn't make any sense to me. So moving on. Number 2, I had he was never going to release, basically, right? Maybe, just maybe, Blade was not actually a character that they intended for him to be like a release character, kind of like how we've had Doom. And Doom is a very important part of the story, and he's been there since the beginning, but I don't actually see Doom ever releasing as a character. He's just kind of like this overlord type of guy who's constantly moving strings or pulling strings in the background and doing different stuff like that, right? So I think that could be one reason why we're not getting him. But like I said, that's just number two. So number three, now, this one might be a little bit controversial. And, I want to say that what's interesting about this third point that I'm about to make is that my wife actually is the one that brought it up to me. I was talking to her the other day about another video that I had made and talking about how people, I was talking about a different character. I think it was a video about Ultron or something like that. And somehow the comment section got turned into a conversation about Blade and where is he at and all this kind of stuff. And I was just explaining to her, that I find it interesting how passionate people get about certain characters and how it's hard to kind of do leak videos and stuff, because even though I tell people that it isn't confirmed or to take it with a grain of salt, there are so many other creators that they constantly, that's all they do. They just make these, oh, we got this leak or I heard something or that we might have saw something in the file, so it has to be this. And then their audience gets, they get it in their head that this is something that's confirmed. And then when it doesn't happen, they get really disappointed and they're like, I don't want to play this anymore because I thought such and such was coming to the game, right? I've seen so many thumbnails of Deadpool. I don't understand why we didn't get Deadpool. He's my favorite character, et cetera, right? But like I said, though, or, was about to say, is that when I had mentioned this to her, she actually said that, she was like, well, maybe they don't want to be seen as woke, because she said that, lately a lot of video games and TV shows and stuff, because even though this isn't necessarily her main thing, she does take an interest, kind of like your casual consumer. She goes to all the movies with me. She watches a lot of TV shows. She's played Marvel Rivals from time to time. She's a nurse, so she barely gets any free time. But when, sometimes when she does, she'll sit down and she'll play with me. She likes to main Wanda, interesting enough. Nonetheless, though, when she first said that to me, I was like, what? Come on. This is Marvel Rivals. I was like, they actually have different characters that have different races and stuff. We got Black Panther, we got Storm, we got Namor and stuff like that, right? But then, immediately after I had posted another video that was once again talking about Ultron, and I was wrong in that video. I said that I thought Ultron wasn't coming during the midseason, but I saw in the dev video that they did, their update video, they actually did say like a minute and 25 seconds in, they literally just said Ultron's coming in midseason. So I kind of missed that initially when I first watched it. I think I was probably like cleaning up or something in the background and just wasn't paying attention to it as much as I should have been. But nonetheless, though, in that video, which I posted, right after me and her had this conversation. It wasn't even like 30 minutes later that one of my, subscribers who comments regularly, I can't remember his name, but if you're listening, you know who you are. You have the Batman picture. It's more like an old school picture of Batman, cartoon or comic book. I can't tell exactly which. I never zoomed in on it, but you know who you are if you're listening. Nonetheless, though, he had actually made the same exact point. And then I saw a couple other people after that make the same exact point. And it kind of made me start thinking a little bit, simply because, lately there has been kind of like this thing, like when I was growing up, politics were politics, religion was religion, and comic books and video games were what they were. But I feel like if we're being honest, lately there has kind of been this, I guess you could say, merging of the groups where people are starting to, and some people say that the people that have these opinions and get offended by this stuff aren't actually real fans, which I personally kind of agree with, because a lot of times their opinions, you can just tell they don't even know the source material. And I'll give you an example, right? The new Ironheart show that's coming out. Now, Ironheart has been in the comic books for some years now. This isn't anything new. Anybody who's been keeping up with Iron Man and what's been going on with him, they know about Ironheart. Even if you haven't been keeping up with Iron Man, she shows up in different comics and stuff like that. And, there was this big controversy. People were going back and forth once the little, it was like a teaser trailer for Ironheart released. And then I think they actually released a pretty decent, maybe like a minute and a half, 2 minute long trailer. And, there's all these people on Twitter talking about, what is this? What is this slop? Disney's going woke, all this other stuff. And this isn't the first time that I've seen this, right? I had made a video months and months ago talking about I can't remember the name of it, but it's the game that Naughty Dog has coming out. And they had a female who had a shaved head in it, and people were making these massive comparisons between that game and Stellar Blade, and they were saying this is why game studios are going broke and different things. And sometimes I feel like that is kind of the case. Like I feel like two things can be right at the same time, because if you think about Concord, right? Concord did terrible, and Concord was a hero shooter. And the thing is that me personally, I wouldn't have played Concord simply because I wasn't really into here. Like I barely played Overwatch, and I like the designs and the characters and stuff like that in Overwatch. And I think it has a pretty rich rich characters and rich story and stuff like that. But Concord, I'm not gonna lie, the characters are kind of hard to look at. Like just visually, they were just kind of hard to look at. And to me, that's no different than me just not liking an aesthetic. I tend to not like games that are from certain time periods. I'm more of like a modern day type of gamer, meaning like games that have more of a modern day aesthetic or like a futuristic and cyberpunk aesthetic and stuff like that. Those tend to be the things that catch my eyes, right? But like I said, if you show me a game that's like from the 1940s or 50s or something like that, probably not going to be interested. That's always been kind of like my gripe with the Black Ops games, is that they were set like in an older time period, and I'm more of a modern warfare type of guy, right? And that's what actually got me to play Marvel Rivals, even though I'm not into hero shooters, but I love Marvel characters, so I was willing to make an exception for Marvel Rivals, and ended up really enjoying the gameplay naturally and organically. And it's just, a nice cherry on top that it's in the Marvel universe with the Marvel IP, and you get all these characters, all these different cosmetics and stuff that are from different, comics, and some of them are rare, but still, I mean, not rare, but random. But the point that I'm making is that Concord failed horribly. I can't remember exactly how much they said that Sony spent making this game, but it was like somewhere like 200 or 300 million dollars they put into this game. And the game was out for what? A week? And I mean, like I said, two things can be right at the same time. There are instances where, personally, I feel like the word woke has been hijacked. When I was younger, people used to use the word woke as like a compliment. It meant that you weren't a sheep, and that you were paying attention to the things around you, and you didn't just fall for anything, right? And then people have hijacked that word and changed it, which isn't the first time that I've seen a word get changed over time. And now it's used as an insult, right? Like, oh, this thing is woke, it's bad. They're not paying attention to the source material, or they're doing this wrong, or whatever the case may be, right? However you personally interpret it. Nonetheless, though, like I said, I did see this with Ironheart, and it kind of makes me wonder. And like I said, I'm just using Ironheart as an example. I could go on all day and make 5 separate videos talking about all the different things that have been going on lately that are very similar, right? So do I think personally that's what happened? Like they were like, yo, let's not release a black character first, to not upset people or something. No, but I do think that it is something that's interesting and worth talking about, and that it definitely is something that's on people's minds, simply because, like I said, there is no coincidence that my wife said that. And she is a very intelligent person. She pays attention to things that are going on around her, and she is a very like straightforward and honest person. That's why I love her, right? And like I said, to have another subscriber make that same almost verbatim comment, like just an hour later after I posted a video, don't feel like that's any coincidence. And like I said, many people after him too. So on to the final reason why I think that Blade hasn't come. And for number 4, I have that they don't want to build him up. I mean, or they want to build him up, right? And he may play a big role, like a really big role that we're just not aware of, right? Like let's just think about it. Like I was saying before, this all kind of relates back to my original kind of thing I went into in regards to kind of giving the backstory to Blade in the Marvel universe, and why he's seen as so important. You got to think about this, right? They were gonna make a Blade movie, and they were gonna get the guy. I don't want to say his name wrong, but I'm gonna have to. It's like Marshala Ali or something like that. He was the antagonist in the guy that was the antagonist in the Luke Cage TV series, and he was gonna end up being Blade. And this movie has been, I wouldn't say in development, but they've been talking about it, writing a script. It's been passed around like 4 or 5 different times over the last 4 or 5 different years, and they just recently said that they were canceling it, right? And you think about this, the first Blade movie came out when I was a kid, and like I said, I went to school with the dinosaurs, and you're talking about multiple decades later, we have Wolverine and Deadpool, which is one of the highest grossing movies of last year, I believe is when it came out. I'm pretty sure it was last year at this point. Nonetheless, though, it was one of the biggest movies of the year. And of the handful of people that I can't even say handful of people that they brought back, because really you just had Wolverine's daughter, which why would you not bring her back, right? Then you have who was it? Gambit had never been in the same, kind of the same thing that had happened. He was like in development hell. They've been trying to make a Gambit movie for the longest time, and one of the biggest fan castings was the guy's name. I can't remember his name right now, but the guy that played Magic Mike. It's one of those moments where I'm just having a hard time recalling people's names. Nonetheless, they had him playing Gambit. People loved that. The movie theater went crazy when we saw that. And then you had Elektra and Brad Pitt's, or not Brad Pitt, but oh my God, I cannot remember anybody's name right now. The guy that played Ben Affleck. Yeah, Jesus. It's just one of those nights. You have to forgive me, guys. The names are just not coming to me. Nonetheless, you had her playing Elektra, and I personally felt like she did a great job as Elektra in the Daredevil movies. And I mean, he actually even played Daredevil. And I feel like those were good movies, like on their own for the time that they came out. You watch them nowadays, and they're once you've seen Netflix Daredevil, you're kind of like, it's a little cringy. But they were good for the time that they came out in. And then you had Blade, and all of these people gave an excellent performance in the movie, and to me, I feel like a lot of respect is owed to Blade, especially when he was kind of like that moment for Marvel when they said, hey, we're gonna make, we should make like a whole MCU out of this, right? Do something that no one has ever done before in regards to like superheroes and superhero movie and stuff. So maybe they're trying to give him the same respect and treatment in the game and really build him up and just make him, a major part of Marvel Rivals and its storyline and stuff like that before releasing him, instead of just releasing him as just another character. And like I said, those are just some things that I've been thinking about. Now, are any of these things true or verified or guaranteed? No, none of that is, right? Sometimes it's nice to just kind of speculate, and it's nice to kind of talk it out. None of us are sitting in the boardrooms. We're not sitting in the dev rooms or meetings or any of that kind of stuff. They could have intended to release Blade before, and like I said, maybe they decided, hey, you know what, we'll release Blade, in a couple of months or something, and we'll go ahead and get a couple more tanks and supports out because we see that there's a lack of tanks, or there's a lack of people that want to play support, or whatever the case is. And you have to be honest, like, that's kind of what Rivals is right now. It's, you load in, there's 5 people that are insta-lock and DPS, and I get the last person's like, well, I guess I got to play a healer because, like, what are we going to do without one, right? So, that's kind of where we are. So I feel like, the more that they release characters that people want to play that are tanks and healers, it's just going to balance things out. And maybe that's just what's needed. And, sometimes I think, too, that they have a kit ready to go for characters, and then they kind of sit back and they go, well, maybe this is too repetitive, or maybe this is too broken or whatever. Let's go ahead and push these other characters that we have out. And then we'll come back to this character. We'll go back to the drawing board, and we'll release someone who's a little more balanced or up to par, or whatever it is that they have or don't have that they feel like they need, right? So, those are just my thoughts. But, you guys always are more like, like I said, more than likely, I mean, not more likely, but more than welcome to let me know in the comments, what you think, what your thoughts and opinions are. Are you still waiting for Blade? I mean, he's still in the game right now, right? Like, I did a short earlier today. I'm going to be releasing this in the evening, but earlier on the same day, I did a short, explaining that Blade is currently in the Wakanda map. I can't remember which one it's called, but it's the one that has T'Challa's like the circular bed that's in the spawn room when you're waiting. He's actually in there laying down, just taking a nap, and you can see him right now if you go to that map, right? So he's still there. He got freed from Dracula's little dungeon or whatever bro had, on the Midtown map or whatever that map is called. Right? I just call it Dracula's map or whatever. But you know the one I'm talking about. He got freed from there by the Fantastic Four and a couple other people at the end of last season. And now, my man's resting. He's hanging out and he's chilling, right? Like, as he should be. If I had been chained up in somebody's basement for a month, I'd probably want to take an extended nap too. You know what I mean? So it's not in his basement, but you guys know what I'm saying here, right? So, that's just my thoughts on it personally. But, I always love to, I make these videos because I love to hear what you all think, the stuff that goes on in my head and how I perceive things and how I see them. That is not the end all, right? Like, it's just one little tiny drop in a massive pool, right? And you guys make up that pool, and I love to hear what you have to think. Like I said, some of the points that I made, those were ones that I'd heard enough times from other people in comments and stuff. A lot of times I think, well, this must be this way, and then somebody else leave a comment and it completely changes, my perception of something, right? So, like I said, let me know in the comments what you think. Also, don't forget to tell me what you guys think on, or think of season 2. Are you having fun? Are you not? Is it just kind of whatever? Are you playing something else? Has Verdansk got your attention in Call of Duty? Like, what's going on, right? Is there some solo game? Are you guys excited for the new marathon game? I know you guys have seen that. It literally broke Discord and like Twitch earlier today when they did the reveal. I was watching it as well. Definitely signed up for the alpha test because I'm curious about that. But, whatever's going on with you guys, whatever you're playing, whatever you're not, whatever you like, dislikes, whatever, let me know in the comments. I'm here. But that's all I have for this video. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. We're coming up on the 25-minute mark. So, yeah, but I appreciate you guys for listening. This is Dark, and I'm out. Catch you on the next one.